The Forum at 8 with Xolani Gwala.
All right, it is 9 minutes now after 8, and a very good morning to you. A warm welcome to the Forum at 8 here on SAFM, South Africa's news and information leader. Well, this morning, discussing ANC politics, a lot happening over the past couple of weeks in particular. We had planned to play you a little clip of Deputy President Motlanthe speaking last week at the Harold Walpe lecture. We seem just to be having some technical problems in that area. If and when we are able to, we'll certainly bring you those clips here, because there has been a bit of a disagreement within the ANC about how to handle some of the matters that came out of that. The ANC's Gwenda Mantashe yesterday defending the document, the so-called second transition document in the ANC. Of course, this came after Deputy President Kgalema Motlanthe called for the party to do a thorough introspection and in order to remain relevant and not rely on its history. He said there was some misunderstanding of what this second transition was all about. Let me just quickly welcome our guest then on the program who will make sense of what's been happening within the ANC, starting with Mr. Aubrey Machikri. He is an analyst, but also he is he is with the what is happening here, because I'm just looking at some of the information coming through about whether or not we are able to get this clip. No, we are not able to get it. We're going to go straight to Aubrey Machikri, a fellow at the Helen Suzman Foundation. Mr. Machikri, good morning. Are you well, Baba?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
You know, I don't know if this technical problem has anything to do with you, Mr. Machikri, this morning.
No, I think the clip was stolen by one of the other ANC.
Anyway, let me also welcome from our Pretoria studios. Is he from our Pretoria studios this morning to discuss these matters? In fact, I cannot see whether we are able to go through to Pretoria, because clearly there is a problem. Anyway, let me start with you again, Aubrey. What do you make of what has happened in the ANC in the past couple of weeks or so?
Well, if we start with the discussion document on the second transition, I think the first thing to remember is that this document is not an ANC policy document. Mm-hmm. It is a policy discussion document.
Yeah.
And therefore it is correct that ANC members and ANC leaders are articulating different positions on what is essentially a discussion document, which means the final position on this discussion document and other discussion documents will be taken not at the policy conference. Mm-hmm. Because remember, the policy conference itself takes decisions, but those decisions are not binding on the ANC until they are endorsed by the National Conference in December in Mangaung, and therefore the final decisions will be taken by the National Conference in December. But secondly, I think what we have been trying to do, every time the mouth of an ANC leader seems to be about to move, is to see whether such an ANC leader is expressing lack of interest or interest in the presidency of the ANC as a candidate.
That's interesting, and we'll discuss it in a minute. But let me go to Pretoria, because I believe that our Pretoria studios are ready now for us. Professor Somadoda Figeni, a visiting professor at UNISA, is there for us this morning. Professor Figeni, good morning.
Good morning, Perpetual.
Fabulous. Can hear you now, nice and loud. Are you well this morning?
I'm fine, despite all the cold.
It is a little cold. Do you think it's cold in the ANC these days?
I do think that ANC has generated more heat than light in the more recent past, so they can't experience the cold. But in the policy conference and in December, ironically, when it is summer, they may also face perhaps the discontent of the winter if they don't provide a clearer policy position that begin to address poverty, inequality, and all other deep structural issues that were not captured well in the first phase.
Because I just want to know, for instance, the disagreement about the second transition document. Should that be an issue at all? I mean, of course, you heard on Thursday Deputy President Kgalema Motlanthe saying that, as far as is concerned, it's not a very clear document and so on. But the very next day, President Jacob Zuma defending it. And, of course, we've also heard over the weekend the General Secretary of the ANC defending this particular document. Is that an issue at all for you, Professor?
It is an issue to the extent that these disagreements perhaps are giving us a preview of what is to happen between now and December and what is to happen in the policy conference. But what cannot be contested is that all different policy proposals, be it the Youth League or nationalization or appropriation of land or COSATU or NUMSA, all of them, and the second transition document, all agree that the first 18 years of our democratic transition seem to have focused more on putting down the political infrastructure and all that comes with transition. And now the issue of transformation, which addresses social and economic issues, have become more urgent than before, because even when South Africa enjoyed sustained economic growth, this did not impact on structural issues, unemployment, inequality, and all the legacies of the past in terms of the distribution of wealth. And that in itself, whether you are talking to different permutations, is an indication that it's no longer just a choice of leaders, it's a pressure from below.
All right. Let's welcome also on the line Sihle Zikalala. He's ANC's National Executive Committee member as well as KZN Provincial Secretary. Mr. Zikalala, good morning.
And good morning to all participants as well as listeners of SAFM.
Thanks indeed for your time this morning. I just would like to get your take then on the ongoing disagreements about this particular document, second transition. Kgalema Motlanthe last week calling it smatterings of Marxist jargon. What's the view of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal?
Well, one of the things that is important to understand is that we are at a phase where we are engaging on policy proposals. There are documents that have been released by the ANC, and there will be a number of proposals coming from various leaders and structures of the ANC. And that is permitted because we are in a festival of ideas where we are debating, and we believe we'll find each other at a national policy conference next week. As the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, we concur that we are entering into a second transition. In fact, it is a resolution that took at a provincial conference, and over the weekend, since yesterday and today, we are in a workshop where we're preparing ourselves for this policy conference. We believe that the past 18 years have been more important and have delivered freedom to our people. We've got a legitimate government which is governing based on the will of the majority of our country. We've created institutions that protect our country, our constitution, and the rights of everyone in South Africa. We've done with the mark in terms of transformation, changing the life of the people. But we believe that we must enter into a new gear and speed up transformation, in particular at a level of the economy. You will still appreciate the fact that the economy is still concentrated in the hands of a few. And the majority of our people are living in poverty.
Sure.
And they are marginalized.
But here's my problem, and I guess the problem by a lot of other people as well. The second most senior ANC official, if you will, says transitioning from what to what, and the language is not clear and so on. What do you make of that criticism?
I think we will find each other with the deputy president and we will agree at the national policy conference that it is a transition from the first transition, and that first transition was characterized by the effort of putting democracy and institutions of government, as well as ensuring that we instill the culture of human rights and protection of human rights, and ensure that we start service delivery and transformation. So it is a transition from what we have put in place. But our main focus now should be on transforming the economy, in particular to ensure the inclusion of the poor, the marginalized people.
All right, let me bring back Aubrey again then. Do you find it odd that the second most senior ANC figure here doesn't understand what this whole transition is about?
No, I don't, because as I said, this is a discussion document.
All right.
And people are going to have different views about it. But certain things arise out of this debate. First of all, there are two questions that need to be asked. As a document, is the document on the second transition an articulation of sound theory? Secondly, does it describe an objective truth about the state of South Africa? So to the extent that you must ask what it is that ANC members are differing on and what it is there is convergence around, it seems to me all ANC members, or well, let's say most ANC members, will agree that what the second transition document describes does represent an objective truth. To the extent that, yes, the first 2 decades of our democracy have delivered in procedural terms. The institutions are in place and the democratic rules are in place, and largely the democratic experience of the ordinary citizen is positive. But they will then turn around and say that in economic terms, the first 2 decades of our democracy have delivered very little, and therefore there is a gap between the procedural and the substantive as far as our democracy is concerned. But if you look at it as a piece of theory, I think conceptual differences have emerged amongst ANC members. Hence, the argument of the Deputy President that it's not clear what the document is saying about the nature of a transition, or whether there is a transition indeed. Because if you go back to 1969, at the Morogoro conference, when the ANC authored its strategy and tactics document, that 1969 strategy and tactics document spoke in terms of a transition from a global system of capitalism to a socialist international or global order. If you go back to the post-colonial period, you could have spoken about the transition from colonialism to independence on the continent. But even after independence, there was another transition from authoritarian rule to democratic rule. And that transition itself can be broken into two transitions. Hence, people tended to talk about the first wave and the second wave of democratization. And the question people are asking here is, in conceptual terms, what is the nature of the transition this document is talking about? And is there indeed a transition happening? And you'll also have to look at global forces, or the global balance of forces, and ask whether in qualitative terms, is the world changing? And are the shifts significant in scope and depth? And therefore, it seems to me that we should look at this discussion document, firstly, as an intellectual project, and secondly, as a political project. Now, as a political project, some of the differences have occurred because people are positing proxy arguments in favor of their political and leadership preferences.
Yeah. And that's the problem, proxy issues here, because there's also an email, and I would like the Professor Figeni to respond to this email. It comes from Tsuguga's Fahani. He says, it seems battle lines have been clearly drawn within the ANC, and we are really confused. Can you ask the panel the following confusions? What does it mean for Zuma and Motlanthe to debate in public and contradict each other? Second question, who is using who in the Sekhuale Malema alliance or cooperation of pro-capital and pro-nationalization? Third question, isn't the new movement the Friends of the Youth League, the Malema faction of the ANC-YL plus pro-Malema faction of the ANC? Pick up from where you can, Professor Figeni, for me.
Well, I do think that in very direct terms, it's correct that Aubrey is saying the unfortunate thing about these debates is not focusing on the documents being presented, be it nationalization by the Youth League or the second transition by the mainstream ANC leadership. It is used as a proxy. For example, there is some discomfort within some NEC and ANC leaders about the role and the delineation of roles between the Communist Party leadership and the ANC because of the overlaps. Perhaps, and just perhaps, the disclaimer and the question rhetorically coming from the Deputy President might actually be raising issues about the origin of the document and the crafters of the document, which may not have been well canvassed within the inner cycles of the ANC. And therefore, it's beginning to show the fault lines that we may see in the policy conference, because there are nationalists within the ANC, and you do have all permutations of the leftist forces, that come in. So that in itself might just be a reflection of the tensions within this broad church, which is called the ANC, and all the different, ideological strands which are vying to influence. Because when you listen to COSATU justifying its relationship within the tripartite alliance, or you listen to the SACP, all of them, they are saying they want to gain a foothold in order to influence the policies of the ANC.
Sure.
And you'll remember that even during the time of Thabo Mbeki, that tension used to come up again and again, sometimes even questioning the tripartite alliance. So this may just be a reflection of that.
All right. Let me ask Mr. Zikalala again to respond to what my guests have said here, specifically this issue of documents as a proxy for leadership preference, Mr. Zikalala.
Not at all. And I don't think we should sensationalize it. The document interprets the correct and objective conditions that are facing our country, and it tries to probe and provide solutions as well, a number of alternatives on how we should deal with such problems. I think Aubrey was correct in saying it presents the objective analysis of the current conditions, especially when you consider the fact that we have transformed the country into democracy and put in place democratic rules and institutions. But the issue of the economy is still a challenge. Very little has been achieved. The economy is still concentrated on the hands of the few. And many people of our country, especially those who were previously oppressed, are still marginalized in terms of the economy. The document also calls for the ANC to be more radical in bringing change. You will concur that we're entering, in fact, we're finishing the second decade of freedom. And with times goes on, people will begin to say, we've been with the ANC in government, and what is it that the ANC is doing to change our life, in particular in terms of transforming the economy?
All right, let me take some calls here because people want to follow up on some of the things already said. Piwe in Port Elizabeth first. Good morning.
Hi, Xolan, and hi to Comrade Sihle and to Aubrey. Look, Xolan, I'm a member of the ANC, and it's just that I'm just disappointed that I won't be part of that policy conference, because to me, I strongly disagree with the conceptualization of the theory of our revolution as contained in that discussion document, Second Transition. Because, Xolani, to me, this document misguidedly claims that the past 18 years should be viewed as a period for democratization, which to me it's political transition, and that the next 30 or 50 years should be dedicated to a thorough socio-economic transformation in the country. I think I reject that mechanical binary that the Second Transition draws between political and economic transformation. Secondly, Xolani, I strongly believe that political and socio-economic transformation is not a two-stage process. Our struggle, Xolani and Comrade Sihle, has always been about the liberation of African people in particular, and blacks in general, from all forms of political and economic bondage. So to me, I call for a strategic shift in the characterization of the ANC as a disciplined force of the left to be a radical force of the left committed to the meaningful implementation of the Freedom Charter. So, to me, the ANC should further reaffirm white monocultural capital as a strategic enemy of the NDR until we make inroads in achieving the NDR objectives. I think that's my input on the issue.
All right, thank you very much. Let's go to Funani in East London. Hello.
Yes, Xolani, and greetings to your guests.
Yeah.
I think for me, the first question is whether the patriots who died fighting for a first transition, what do they think when they look at us when we are not able to push into the second transition? Where are the intellectuals that used to guide us as we were transforming as a country? I'm a member of AZAPO, and in AZAPO, I'm one of those who support this second transition. It is urgently needed. You see, in this second transition, we understand that the first one was difficult because we had to remove the Nationalist Party with big guns and the nuclear weapon. This one, it's easy to do because we rely on a ballot. We rely on that vote. So this second transition must be about the complete removal of the ANC and what has made it. Removing Jacob Zuma as a president would be a starting point. So long as the ANC and Jacob Zuma and their policies and systems are in place, we will continue in this first transition that is oppressive, that has nothing to do with us as a people. Right. So finally, I think as the ANC is a ruling party, Poland, maybe we should as a country start discussing whether shouldn't we be part of who they elect, so long as they still have the majority, so that while we still have them there, we are able to determine, actually, to push the policies that will talk to us.
All right. Funani in East London, Mr. Zigalala.
But,
yeah, please respond to my two callers.
Hello?
Yeah, please respond to my two callers, if you may.
Oh, yes. No, I think Comrade Pia, the first caller, I would say we welcome his contribution and we will debate as we go to the policy conference. We are all allowed. As I said earlier, we are in a festival of ideas. Let ANC members express their opinions without fear or favor. And that's what we have been doing, including engaging with various comrades as well as various sectors, including the intelligentsia, the professionals, and all institutions, democratic institutions that are in the country. And we have engaged them. A number of people have supported the characterization of the second transition. There are also others who share the same view that Comrade Pierre raised earlier. So we are not saying we want to suppress divergent views from what is proposed in the document. With the last caller, I think is really lost. We are not debating the presidency or how we elect the president of the ANC or the country. We are discussing the policy that relate in particular to the transformation of the economy. Here raised the point that we cannot segment the transformation, and he argues that both political and socio-economic transformation forms one phase of the ongoing revolution.
Yeah.
That's point we're noting and taking. But the question here is that the past 18 years, as we have argued, have been dedicated mostly on the issue of ensuring that we democratize the country.
Okay.
Saying it is the separate phase, but we characterize the next period as a period where we must radically ensure the transformation of our economy.
All right, Sihle Zigalala, thank you very much. Unfortunately, he has to go. Sihle Zigalala is ANC member, also KZN Provincial Secretary. But we'll go to the newsroom then, get updates, come back and get more views from Professor Somato Dafigeni as well as Mr. Aubrey Machikle. We'll hear what they have to say about what we've heard. But remember, our lines are open now for you on 0891 104 208, 0891 104 208. We'll also be taking SMSs at 34701.
The Forum at 8 with Xolani Gwala.
0891 104 208. That's the number to dial this morning, 0891 104 208. Let me read some SMSs here and emails, perhaps starting with emails. There's one from Dan Gosi, who's talking about second transition. He says, I can't understand the comment attributed to our Deputy President with regard to second transition. My understanding is that the draft documents should first be given to the national officials, then the NWC, NSC for approval as discussion document. The statement confirms what analysts and the media have been saying, that the movement is divided on many issues. We need the top leaders to speak with one voice when articulating organizations' issues in public. Dan Gosim. Aubrey, isn't he right about this? Because the documents were approved by a special NEC meeting, as I recall.
Well, I don't agree, Perpetua, that leaders of the ANC and other members of the ANC should speak with one voice on any discussion document, including the second transition document. Because as I keep on saying, that's what it is. It is a discussion document.
Yeah.
And therefore, I hope Mr. Zigalala is correct when he says what we're seeing is a festival of ideas, not a festival of faction. And therefore, it is my hope that despite tensions and divisions within the ANC, at the policy conference and in Mangaung, they will be able to discuss these documents and come up with policy positions that will take the country forward. Because you need to go back to what Funani was saying.
Mm-hmm.
We can look at what Funani was saying in narrow terms, that he is calling for the removal of President Jacob Zuma and the ANC. Whereas we need to ask a deeper question. The deeper question for me is this. To the extent that South Africa is facing domestic challenges and continental challenges with regard to how we should position ourselves on the continent, and to the extent that there are shifts occurring in the global system, the question is whether the ANC still remains the vehicle through which these challenges can be addressed correctly and effectively. Because it is not enough to describe an objective reality and therefore to describe an objective truth and posit alternatives. The ANC and its members must ask themselves whether the ANC remains the vehicle through which the deepening of the gains of the National Democratic Revolution can occur.
All right, Professor Figeni, here's a couple of SMSs for you. There's one that says this second transition is equal to Malema's economic freedom in our lifetime. Another one says, why second transition now, not started in 2007? It sounds opportunistic and iyambambezela. That SMS is not signed. There's Jerry in Durban, though, who says, is the ANC admitting now that its economic policies for the past 18 years have failed? Lianya Etegwini says, when is the ANC going to draw a policy document on the criteria and guidelines to elect leaders to office, particularly the president? Another one says, we are witnessing the death throes of the once mighty ANC, and it'll take us down with them. JB in Durban says, yes, the economy is in the hands of the few, and that is the elite in the ANC and minority wealthy whites. KB says, talk and more talk. We need doers now. Recycling documents is a futile exercise. What has stopped the ANC from transforming the economy all along, KB? Your responses, if you may, for me here, Professor Figeni.
Well, just one thing from one of the SMSs is actually affirming what I said earlier, that no matter which policy position, be it the ANC Youth League, some formations of COSATU, or the ANC itself, there is a tacit admission that the first 2 decades did not deal with the deep structural and systemic historical issues pertaining the economic and the social sphere. Therefore, the demography and the apartheid geography and the persistence of the legacy of the past is what pushing everybody to begin to ask what should be done next. To the extent that the second transition document is important by actually defining a marker that you need to do something else different from the past, I think conceptually it is good in making that particular contribution. But where it has not come out very clearly is what that second transition will look like, or what were the shortcomings of the first transition in a deeper sense, rather than the allusions which it makes. But the most important thing, though, is that once the policy conference has taken place, it becomes easier to have a robust discussion on what leadership mix would therefore carry that particular process forward.
All right.
Because in the absence of that, one runs around personalities and says so-and-so looks closer to so-and-so. But once ANC gets into an agreement that the broad policy outlook which should be adopted in December is the following, then the next question should be the state capacity and the quality and the character of cadres which are there vying for leadership positions should be informed by the imperatives which come out of this policy document. But in the absence of that, factionalisms and slates will not carry this process forward, because it often runs for the lowest common denominator, who appeared in which list. Therefore, we can't use that one, even if the person has a capacity.
All right. What I'll do is take a commercial break now, but when we come back, more SMSs, emails, and there are a couple of people as well on the line who would want to ask certain questions, also weigh in on this discussion. 0891 104 208, 0891 104 208. It's 18 minutes before 9.
Get an investment that offers returns of up to 25% with zero risk. Sounds too good to be true? Well, start believing. This June only, Share Plus from Standard Bank offers returns of up to 25%. Your initial investment is guaranteed. There are no fees or commissions. Plus, you can get started from as little as 25,000 Rand. Move to real banking value. SMS your name and Share Plus to 31645.
Standard Bank. Moving forward. An authorized financial services and registered credit provider. Terms and conditions apply. Standard Network Rate Supply.
When we brought you the Star Africa edition, we knew that it would be huge.
I like the Verve section. It beats any other paper's lifestyle section.
The sports section's unrivaled.
Well, it certainly has more columnists and opinion pages than I've ever seen.
Whenever I want to, I can become one of the many readers who contribute.
Now that's what you call big.
No other paper can touch it, and that is that.
Get more of everything in a tabloid-sized newspaper. The Star Africa edition. The new star in town.
The New Companies Act has introduced a variety of amendments that have serious implications to all companies and close corporations. Recently, MNS has developed a thorough understanding of the New Companies Act so as to assist small and medium enterprises to comply with this act. For this and many other legal issues, contact the experts, Ndisi, Ndlovu and Sedumedi attorneys. In short, MNS attorneys. At 011 447 3811.
The Forum at 8 with Xolani Gwala.
All right, I'll go to the lines in a minute, but let me read you one or two emails here. There's one from Johnny Musa who says, is the ANC still relevant in this current dispensation? And why has this issue of this second transition why was it not dealt with at CODESA? Says Johnny Musa on an email. Sigyn Randberg says, instead of transforming education and skills training for the upliftment of the black majority, the ANC's policy proposals hold out false promises to the uneducated and unemployed with vague Marxist allusions which suggest violations of the Constitution and the dispossession of all whites and foreign investors. I congratulate Deputy President Motlanthe for questioning such populist deception which threatens our democracy and our economy, says Sigyn Randberg. Yaj also sent an email saying all this talk becomes empty rhetoric unless the question of monetary and banking reform is addressed. We either stop fractional reserve banking by the private banks, whereby banks issue 97% of our money supply by creating credit from thin air, or we rapidly establish a public bank of the deposit-taking type, but the equivalent of ABSA, etc. Secondly, it must be made possible for the government to borrow directly from the Reserve Bank money that is interest-free and debt-free for its essential expenditure on infrastructure, etc., and not have to rely on taxation or borrowing an interest from the private sector through government bonds, loans. Yours sincerely, Yaj Chetty, SA New Economics Network. Let's hear from Hassan Logat here in Johannesburg. Good morning, Hassan.
Hi, Xolani.
Yeah, hi.
The last email you read basically touches on some of the questions because Yaj is talking about what has not been done.
Yeah.
So when you present, when the ANC presents its discussion document as if everything in the first phase of the struggle was honky-dory, now for the second phase of implementation, there were many failures of implementation. There was bad policy. Policy was not only won, it was lost as well. And there was a lack of implementation. So I don't understand why this rigid separation has been put in part of the analysis.
All right, interesting. Hassan Logat, I'll ask my guest again to reflect on what Hassan is saying. Gerald in Durban, good morning.
Hi, Xolani.
Yeah,
hi, Xolani. Look, if you want to implement any policy, you have to elect quality leadership. Mm-hmm. You cannot band together a government on the stairs of the Pietermaritzburg High Court with someone facing corruption charges and hope that you're going to get anyone who's going to implement anything other than a kleptocracy to enrich the supporters that supported him on the stairs of the High Court. Now, we've seen what's happened in the northern Cape with John Block. He's also facing corruption charges, but he's been elected as the party leader there. We see in KZN the whole senior leadership of the ANC all in the Pietermaritzburg High Court facing corruption charges. You'll never be able to implement anything other than a kleptocracy if you're going to elect people who are facing corruption charges.
All right, that's Gerald in Durban. Aubrey, respond to the issues of leadership and also perhaps what Hassan was saying. There seems to be a rigid separation of the first and second transition.
Well, let me start with the rigid separation. I mean, it can be argued that the lack of conceptual clarity arises from insufficient appreciation of the fact that what they describe as the second transition is actually part of a broader transition, and what the ANC would refer to as the National Democratic Revolution. So in conceptual terms, what they should resolve is whether what they are describing is not actually a stage within a transition. But let me go back to issues of leadership and what Ukwesibe was saying about slates. As long as factionalism and slates persist in the ANC, even after Mangaung, will remain an organization in qualitative decline at an intellectual level, at a strategic level, at a moral level, and at a leadership level. So one of the challenges the ANC has to face and confront is that of changing itself into the vehicle it needs to be to give effect to our developmental and other challenges. But also people keep on saying, and even in some of the ANC documents, people talk about the fact that the economy is concentrated in a few hands, and some will say in white hands. The question the ANC must ask itself is whether the problem is that the economy is concentrated in white hands, and whether it matters or matters not that if the white hands are black or white. And it seems to me what they should be attacking is not necessarily the fact that the economy is concentrated in white hands. And yes, that must change. But beyond that, it cannot be a good thing that beyond that the economy will continue being concentrated in a few hands, black or white.
Sure. I just want to go back again to this issue of qualitative decline, or if you may establish that for me a little bit more, develop it further. Why would the ANC be, even after Mangaung, on this qualitative decline that you're talking about?
Well, the ANC remains tension-filled, is racked by divisions, and factionalism runs quite deep in the party. And it's very difficult for the ANC to have genuine policy discussions because, as I said at the beginning, when people debate policy positions, they at times posit proxy arguments in favor of their leadership and political preferences. For instance, some ANC members, in response to this document, for them the most important question is, who are the authors? Because the identity of the authors will determine their attitude towards this document. And if you look at the things that have been happening, disruptions of national events arising from internal ANC battles, if you look at ANC leaders delivering so-called lectures, when in fact these lectures are nothing but an excuse to insult political enemies in the ANC, and therefore doing a disservice to the memory of the stalwarts in whose name they deliver these lectures. If you look at the fact that the ANC is able to go out to march against the spear as an assault on the dignity of black people, but not enough of a focus there was not enough focus on the fact that some of the failures of the ANC in health, in education, and elsewhere are themselves an assault on the dignity of black people. So all of that is indicative of an organization that is in a state of qualitative decline. And as I said, if the slates and the factionalism continues, whatever is decided in Mangaung or at the policy conference will come to naught, because the ANC will not be the vehicle through which we can meet our challenges as a nation.
And Professor Figeni, of course, over the weekend reported bust-ups at special NEC leadership, calling each other names and so on. It adds to what Aubrey say.
Actually, there is nothing as dramatic as what you have just heard now from the Provincial Secretary of KZN, saying that the Deputy President, we hope, will bring him along. It's unprecedented, because he ought to have been in the center of some of these policy discussions, even at their draft form. That he is outside and raising issues is indicative precisely of the point that Aubrey is making. And if you look at the post-colonial experience of liberation movements in Africa, the problem we've not done thorough comparative analysis with South Africa is because the notion of South African exceptionalism has denied us an opportunity to look at what happened to liberation movements after 20-25 years. They decline, after which they either reinvent themselves with programs that improve the lives of people, or they use authoritarian means to stay on power. Now, I don't think leading to Polokwane or post-Polokwane, ANC has spent enough time on the question of unity and discipline.
But then again, Professor Fikeni, people can read this in many ways. As Aubrey was suggesting earlier on, that perhaps there's nothing wrong with the deputy president differing necessarily. It may very well indicate the democracy within the party, that you may be a deputy president, but if there's a document you don't agree with, you don't agree with. You must say that in public.
Public discourse is to be welcome at all times, and that in itself is very important. But look at the spaces and the times and the timing, how this is introduced. Either the president introduces it as by the way in some of his speeches, and the deputy president find another platform to sort of jab at this particular document. And another level actually here, I think Aubrey was correct in saying, because of factionalism, people are looking at who were the authors and sometimes drawing the lines. The SACP in its documents talked of a two-stage revolution. Some leaders may actually be anxious that second transition might be referring to the second stage rather than continuity of a national democratic revolution taking on different phases. And this came up during Thabo Mbeki's African Renaissance, when some were saying this is now becoming more narrowly Africanist rather than broad enough to encompass what the alliance partners are saying. So those are some of the subtle ideological differences which permutate into personalities vying for positions in Mangaung. That's the most unfortunate thing, because one wishes that the policy conference would have quite a gap between itself and the elective conference, because now this is what is diluting the whole exercise.
Gee. All right, let's hear quickly from Motala in Durban. Hello, Motala.
Now, the failure of the ANC as a ruling party, not as a party of struggle, to bring about a meaningful change, to reduce meaningfully the extreme poverty situation in the country. That is the main reason. They have failed as a ruling party, not as any other party. And this is where the problem lies. If we look at other countries where we had a similar situation, in fact, worse in China, the first thing Mao Zedong did was to give the people the land, to start there and improve their position.
Okay.
Today in South Africa, the people are prepared to even go to jail because they haven't got food, they haven't got work, they haven't got anything to do, rather than suffer starvation.
All right, that's Mutala in Durban. Tabi Soweto, hello.
Hi, Colin, how are you, my brother?
I'm very well, thanks for your call.
You see, Colin, our history, man, the more things change, the more they stay the same, if you look at the origin of the Freedom Charter, there's still a controversy as to where is the Freedom Charter coming from, And we know that Freedom Charter was authored largely by the South African Communist Party. Today we're having these other mystery documents, to try and thwart, Colin, and usurp the struggle of the black people, you know what I'm saying? ANC, 18 years of democracy, they were not only dealing with politics, they were dealing with economic issues. And they were never honest and tell people that we have failed and that therefore we are coming with a new thing. I'm saying that as black people, we need constituent assembly, to understand. If we continue to struggle within the parameters of the ANC, we're not going to go anywhere.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Tabiso is in Soweto. Let me read this email and just maybe one or two emails actually, just get the last thoughts from my guests. Sam actually wants to know, can Aubrey explain what the NDR means? Aubrey will respond to that in a minute, Sam. But also there's another one, Mamulelo Tsehla, who says the ANC can draft more and more documents. The issue is the capacity to implement them. Capacity of the so-called officials is lacking. That's according to Mamulelo Tsehla in Katlehong. Aubrey, perhaps picking up on the issue of implementing these policies and then talking about the NDR briefly?
Well, I mean, you need several programs to describe that.
The NDR.
All I can say is that it is the ANC's theory of revolution. And so I would invite the author of the email to go into the ANC website and read the relevant document. But what I think is important here is that the ANC must accept that it has become an undignified political space. And if it accepts that it has become an undignified political space, it must also accept that whether it talks of a second transition or a third or fourth transition, what it sets as its strategic goals will come to naught if it doesn't deal with those issues that populate this undignified space, and if it does not do so effectively. Now, whatever the conceptual errors of this discussion document are, there's another error that the ANC must avoid in its debate, and that is the error of a logic of narrow economism. Because when we engage with the shifts in the global system, we tend to do so in terms of this logic of a narrow economism, when in fact what we should be talking about is how are we as a country, how is the ANC and other forces in society in South Africa and the continent going to exploit these shifts in the global system in such a way that what we end up with is a more ethical and more equitable global system.
Okay. Professor Sifigeni, your last comments for me, please.
Well, I do think that key to this particular debate is the issue of the character of the ANC and its cadres. They may have all the best policy documents, but if they don't deal with the issue of divisions, disunity, as well as the quality and the capacity of their cadres, this will just become another nice to read, because the organization is in a crisis in many ways, and they have to address that. And most importantly, once they are divided, they can't even count, 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 they can't